Welcome to Who Dares Rolls. I'm Charlie Etheridge Nunn, and I thought I'd give a bit of a look at a couple of older RPGs and a couple of newer ones, all by the same publisher though. I had a delivery of a couple of their games and thought I really want to talk about them, and then I looked at their other games and went, I really want to talk about them as well. So for now, this is going to be a bit of a spotlight on Black Armada. Black Armada have put out a few larger role-playing games and a ton of tiny role-playing games. I've played all of their big ones and a couple of their little ones, and I've loved every single one. It's run by Josh Fox and Becky Annison, who I've had the pleasure of meeting a few times now, and there's definitely something about the way in which they present their games, which has been really good fun. So with that in mind, let's crack on with the first one. This is Lovecraft-esque. Now, old HP, as anyone that's seen Mike's previous video on trolling and on discussions of Lovecraft, know that he is the king of the problematic faves. He is was a racist, was not great at writing women or dialogue or people, but he did madness really well. There's a reason why a lot of his ideas are pervasive, a lot of them stick, and I'm not here to defend him, and hopefully any right-minded viewers know enough of his problematic elements so we don't need to go into that any further. So, Lovecraft-esque. Why another Lovecraft role-playing game? There's Call Cthulhu, Trail of Cthulhu, Cthulhu Hack, Cthulhu Dark, Tremulous, Mythos World, and more. So many more, inevitably. This does something the others don't. It does something actually a couple of them are starting to learn to do. This has one protagonist. You play one character and you pass that character around the group. That character is the witness. The witness you either make up or you create, you kind of pick from one of the dozen or so scenarios in the book. This witness has a personal strength, a reason for doing what they're doing. And that is the only lead character. But you also have a narrator. The narrator is the person who asks for questions, who creates the world, and the Watcher and Witness players are prohibited from establishing fiction about the world. They can certainly say, oh, what's in this cupboard? And the narrator will go, oh, there's something leaking underneath it. It's a bit scary looking. And as I've just mentioned, there are Watchers for anyone else. This is a 3 to 5 player game. You have each of those roles and they rotate scene by scene around the table. And what happens is you'll run a scene and something odd might happen, something interesting, and will go on, and the narrator will say that is a clue. And you develop clues, normally in the before times in a physical space, on index cards, chuck them down on the table, say, oh yes, weird leaky cupboard, something looking like it's moving behind the walls, anything like that. But there are some strict rules here. You cannot have anything supernatural. You cannot have a clear threat for witness, and you cannot have direct evidence of violence. Now that makes it sound like it's not a Lovecraft game. It makes it sound like it's not anything weird. So where does that come in? And that comes in with these lovely boys. These are special cards. And what happens with them is you will have one of these each. You'll keep them to yourself initially, but you'll have a little part of the mystery. So if myself and 2 others have a special card each, I might have visions. Someone else will have a strange location. Someone else will have warped bodies. With each of these, it tells you the kind of horrors, the kind of mysteries that this might affect. So vision says dreams, hallucinations. The strange location says an inaccessible place, an other dimension or hidden location. And warped bodies says monstrous traits, deformities, or disease. Now, didn't intentionally do this, but I'm pretty sure these were exactly the ones that were taken during my very first game of Lovecraft-esque, which was a kind of weird black hole space station kind of story. And the thing is, these allow you to break those rules about what you can and what you can't do. And they start off small and they grow over time. This is a game that's broken down into 3 acts. The first one is going to be 5 scenes, and that means each player will get at least 1 time that they're the witness. So part 1, as an example, with visions, part 1 says you can reveal clues well beyond rational explanation, only seen in visions. Then, once part 1's done, we've all got our clues. Then we move on to part 2. Part 2 is variable in how long it's going to be. It can be a maximum of 3 scenes. And the reason behind that is because from this point onwards, whatever drags you into the final place, whatever, like the Shadow over Innsmouth, the hotel scene and all of that kind of thing where you go, oh my God, there's an escalation. Things have got bigger and it's going to drive me towards the end. So that could happen at any time. So brace yourself, because it could happen on the first scene in part 2. Oh my God, I've fallen into the end. If you dally, if you take too long, if it takes 3 scenes, and I've been in games where both has happened, the third scene will end with you having to move on to part 3 abruptly, often. So in this case, part 2, you can begin making elements of the vision real, whether explicable or not. And then finally, part 3 can actually take place in a vision for this card. Obviously, they're different for everyone. Some, like warped bodies, only work in part 2 and 3 because you start off calm, you start off normal, maybe a little unsettled, but as time goes on, this means the narrative will spiral out. Part 3 is the journey into darkness, the final horror, and an epilogue. This is something which speeds everything up. So where you've got the watcher, the witness, and the narrator, you pick one of those 3 and you say a couple of sentences. You basically tighten the story down. You focus it into this beat by beat journey down and down and down into the depths. And it's something where we're all working together. We're all making a story that none of us really know what the mystery is or where it's going, but it kind of almost becomes like some weird poetry as you get further and further down. It does almost feel like you're descending as you go through all of this until the final beat drops. Now, you're all working together, you're all making a mystery, and you've all got one special card, which when you play, when you kind of add the story, you'll reveal, and people will be able to add to, and that's all nice. But that doesn't sound like it's going to make a coherent story, does it? And that's where some of the soft mechanics work beautifully in Lovecraft-esque. I've already said the Journey into Darkness feels poetic. This next bit is so much better. It's one of those beautiful mechanics like Contempt in Avery Alder's Quiet Year, where you look at it and go, what is it? It's just, just words. And then you think about it and it's like, oh fuck, this is amazing. So the final part that brings all of this together is something called leaping to conclusions. So you play out a scene, maybe you're the witness, you're going, oh, what's behind those weird wibbly walls? Oh well, I'm going to have some tea. And the narrator says, oh yeah, the things that might be behind those walls, that's the clue. Puts it down onto the table with any other clues. And then everyone gets a bit of paper and quickly scribbles down, like trying not to think too much about this, but they try and write down, oh, is it that there are bugs, there are weird bugs inside the walls? Or someone else might go, there's some rift in space and time. You all leap to a conclusion about what the mystery's about, and then you carry on. And the thing is, when you're in the next scene, you're driving towards what you wrote, and the other players are also driving towards what they wrote. So what's going to happen is everyone's going to evolve their story. They're going to move it closer and closer towards a unified vision, unintentionally almost, because when the next scene happens and I'm driving more towards bugs in the walls, whoever's written Temporal Rift might be going, there could be bugs coming out of a temporal rift. And all of these assumptions change and evolve over time, and they're not meant to be dwelt on too much. You just quickly, boom, bugs, walls, go, and so on and so on. And you can see it's almost like you've cast a net of plot and you're drawing it closer and closer and closer. This creates the element of a mystery that none of us made. Like, none of us came up with ahead of time. And even so, despite all of that, it couldn't have been anything else. It feels preordained, it feels destined to be this one mystery. And I love it. It's a beautiful game. It does Lovecraftian horror amazingly well. It does it very differently to a lot of different games. And there are some, like, I know, Trail of Cthulhu has been doing Cthulhu Confidential as a one-player, one-GM sort of game, and even Call of Cthulhu released in the last week or so a one-player, one-GM scenario. So it's cool seeing other people experimenting in those places, but there is something kind of beautiful about this one, which feels more poetic than old HP could have managed, and kind of wonderful. The game doesn't actually take that long compared to a lot of role-playing games. At Dragonmeet, someone very kindly demoed it for my friend and I, and we made up a scenario from scratch and played it in an hour in the Indie Games on Demand tables, and that was amazing. We even had the horrific card that I'm always worried is going to happen, which is replace the witness, where partway in, the witness can die. The witness can be replaced and someone else will take the rest of the story. And for us, that was a last minute thing. So in the final scene, our poor dilettante widow had been exploring this hotel, seeing the kind of almost time-lost nature of it, and those things in the walls, and the strange way that people were not quite eating right, and the park across the road that had a statue that no one could place where it came from or what it was, but it was some kind of very abstract, very surreal thing that seemed to keep drawing her in. And one night, she was taken and gone. And the old veteran, old military guy that she'd been kind of chatting with and who'd seen enough horrors, enough things to be able to understand and follow her path of logic when she was beginning to suspect things. He was the protagonist for the very end. And he was one that finally went down into the basement, a literal descent for our journey into darkness. And that's where he saw the things peeling out from whatever was behind that wallpaper. That's where he saw her, much like the rest of the guests now, writhing with these creatures under the skin. And it was bleak. And it was horrible, but it's Lovecraft-esque, after all. So that's it for me, for this review. Next up, we have a tale of mundane, small-scale adventures in space with Flotsam. Realise I've gone very purple for this second Black Armada look. Unfortunately, I have no science fiction-y looking t-shirts, weirdly. The closest I've got that relates to this, I guess, is Magneto and some of the valid points that he did make, given some of the focus on this game. But I'm afraid that's what we're stuck with for now. So this review is of Flotsam, Adrift Amongst the Stars by Josh Fox. This is the second big game that they've released, and a solo outing from Josh, although there have been several other contributing writers to it as well. Flotsam bills itself as a game of outcasts, misfits and renegades living in the belly of a space station in the shadow of a more prosperous society. You are the civilians in BSG. You're the people in the down below in Babylon 5. You are the people working in the promenade in Deep Space Nine rather than anyone actually running any of it. You are the people often beneath the people who are running whatever science fiction kind of entity, whether it's a space station or a spaceship or whatever you happen to be on. You can even see this lovely art. Well, it's a little sunny here, so this lovely art and even the reverse image on the back of them, all kind of cozy and put away there. So this is a game which is derived from the belonging outside belonging style of game, made originally by Dream Askew and Dream Apart, and having evolved in several really, really interesting ways. There's no GM, but I've often heard of this kind of game as being called not GM-less, but GM full, as you are all part of a GM. And I quite like that as a thing to do. So what is this? I've already said where you are with it. Well, you have a primary, and this is your main character. And each of you have one. They have evocative class names like the Thunder, the Spider, the Voice, the Cast-Off, the Sybil, the Hybrid, the Scum, the Outsider, and the Vapor. Your primary is who you'll be focusing on when it comes your turn to have a scene. And when you have a scene, you will go through a list of different questions about what to frame it as. And I've had problems with games where it's been like, okay, cool, there's no GM, you've got a character, go. And people just look at you blankly. This has ways of solving it. We'll get there. So you have a primary. There are going to be secondary characters. They'll be dotted around normally for me on index cards, and people can pick them up or leave them down there as they see fit. Anyone can play as them, but your primary is your character. You also each have a situation, and the situation is the fragmented part of a GM. So they are the community, poverty, gangs, the above, the spirits, the outside, resistance, and war. What it means to take each of these is this is something in focus. So if you're in a kind of down below B5 sort of thing, if someone takes above, people above, they're going to be relevant to the plot. And this is a 3 to 5 player game. So if someone takes above, someone takes spirits, and someone takes gangs, you know the story that's being made. There are, I think, 6 scenarios. Yeah, 6 setups in here which have characters and primaries in a prescribed list. And that's kind of cool. Of going, here, you have this setup, run with it. And I've done that for the one play I've done of this so far. But you can make your own. And with that, you can then focus on, this is sci-fi. Oh, I don't want spirits. I don't want some kind of mysticism. Cool. We won't have spirits. We'll have the outside. How does the outside influence all of this? And while the primaries are going through the scenes, the other people will then be throwing in questions from the outside or the above or the gangs, whatever aspect they control. And it does recommend, for example, if you are the Thunder and you're going to be a gang leader or anything like that, then someone else should control the gangs, because they'll be able to ask you questions and you're not just talking to yourself. So it's got some really nice elements to it with that. There's even a teaching guide, which I love. I love Black Armada's teaching guides. I want more role-playing games to do teaching guides, because this way I can forget about this. I read way too many role-playing games. I will not remember this system between plays of it, and that's no diss on Flotsam. That's going to be the case for pretty much every role-playing game. But with a teaching guide, it means that I can go in blind to a session and go, let's do Flotsam. I feel like Flotsam. And open it up, run through it all, pass the resources around, and go. Lovecraft-esque does the same, and these are some of the best things that I've found in role-playing games. So, you have your primary, you have your situation. Now what? Well, there's a kind of flowchart-like list of what to do when it is your scene. And personally, being me, I'd probably end up going, I'll go first and show you how it's done. And we have this. I might try and get Mike to put it up somewhere here. It looks a bit complex, but basically, in this game, you will ask questions. So is there any obvious burning thing that must happen? Well, someone was, like the voice had inspired a riot. I'm next. I'm a priest, and I want to, like, burningly, I need to say what happens. Like, I'm taking in the cast outs, I'm taking in the people that are injured from it. So that's what has to happen next. Or, you know, a bomb's gone off. Obviously, we need to see the aftermath. So I'm the primary, but I need to do that. If not, that's fine. Is there anything your primary, your focal character, wants to accomplish or to interact with? So there's not a bomb, there's not a riot, there's nothing like that, but we've been tracking down some meds, and the gang's going to get them and distribute them amongst themselves and extort any of the merchants, anything like that. So I want to interact with this. I want to find out where the meds are being stored. Okay, well, it's not a burning essential thing right now, but that's what we're focusing on. And if that isn't even what you want to do you want to trigger one of your weaknesses or deal with your situation? So each primary has strengths, which cost points, and weaknesses, which give them points. If you're out of points and you go, wow, I want some, I feel things aren't getting exciting enough, and this is a game that very much encourages playing for drama and making sure that you do actually create problems if there aren't enough problems. So an example weakness here for the spider is maybe you're hooked on your own stuff, or a control freak, or greedy and ambitious, or like maybe you're in hook to a gang, your contacts covet your position, or ruthless commercial rivals, or maybe you owe money to insatiable loan sharks. So you go, I've got no points, got nothing to spend, no tokens or anything, so I want a bit of drama. I'm playing a Quark-like character. I'm a merchant, and I'm greedy and ambitious. I've heard the gangs are doing dodgy stuff with tracking down meds. I want in. So I'm going to go to their bar, and I'm going to overreach. Give me a token. And that's kind of the third step of the questions here. The final one, if there's nothing burningly obvious, if there's no kind of things that your focal character wants to interact with, if you don't want to trigger a weakness, if you're kind of filled with analysis paralysis, any of that. I've got a friend, Lee, who I feared how he'd be with this. But with this chart, he went, no. Well, someone's going to ask you a question about your focal character's daily life. And that gives him something to react from. And this is a very welcoming game for people like that, for people that often freeze up when you say, cool, go. Here's run a scene, establish a scene in things like Fiasco. So that's something of real merit in this, something I really love. This is something which is quite resource heavy in the physical world. You've got this, and while there are no dice, you'll need tokens, something to push around. But the heavy resource that I've found is paper, is the stuff. Having like a flow of how narratives go of like, oh yeah, here's a problem. Well, do you want to spend a token? No, I want to get a token, so I'll make it worse and it'll escalate and drive forward drama and so on. That's out in the center of the table. You've got setup. Each scenario has a modified version of the teaching guide, which will expand specifics to that setup. Or if you make your own, there's another teaching guide, which is expanded to include how you do that. Then there's the character sheets, which will be about 5 per scenario or more if you've got blank ones for making your own. Same with situations. So I found I was creating these thick bundles that I was taking along. So what I ended up doing was just going, I'm picking 2. My printer is eccentric. I don't have much ink, so I'm printing 2. I'm saying this or this. And that seemed to work well. The character sheets are very nice, very clear, and they even have things written on the opposite side for players to do things and give you tokens. And get tokens for themselves from you, even. It's weird having stuff that other people trigger and get on your character sheet, but again, kind of cool. So an example, again, from my friend the Spider is when you hook me up with something I need, or vice versa, gain a token. So it's got some really nice interactivity, and it's going to push the drama, push the plot ever forwards. Now, so far I've only run this as a one-shot. I would be really interested to see what a campaign is like and how it evolves, especially for one of these heavy narrative, no dice, no masters systems. So that's Flotsam. Black Armada, and specifically Josh Fox, does go into science fiction again in the future. In their most recent release of Last Fleet. But I'll not be getting to that one yet. Next up, we have Bite Marks, a game of family and of werewolves. So join me then. Guess who forgot to record an outro? Yes, it's me, your dashing host. So, we've had a look at Lovecraft-esque, we've had a look at Flotsam. The newer arrivals of Black Armada games will be reviewed in our next video from Who Dares Rolls with an E. And subscribe to the channel if you want to see that. Comment if you've had any experiences with these games or want to, or whether you've got similar recommendations of games to check out, because I have a million games still to read, but I'm always up for more. Have a look at Black Armada's site. You can buy the games both physically and digitally there. Also, have a look at Black Armada's Patreon, which has been on hiatus until very recently because of lockdown shenanigans. But there are some incredible short games there. There are things like History Dig Live, which is their time team game, and I cannot recommend that enough. I've run it a couple of times. It's very, very good fun. So there's that from them. From us, there's this YouTube channel that you're on. I won't point you to it because you're already here. There's Who Dares Rolls, that's with 2 L's, which is the website itself, where hopefully I'll get some written reviews up at some point soon. I'm kind of in the middle of a Kickstarter at the moment, so that's distracted me a bit. But also go to the Who Dares Rolls Patreon if you want to kick in a bit of money to help keep us in biscuits and replacement bits when I need a microphone that's a bit better than a Rock Band mic. And finally, that Kickstarter. Yes, I have a comic on Kickstarter at the moment called Explosion High. If you like flying sharks with robot arms as lead characters, if you want weaponized dinosaurs, if you want very dangerous, weird academia and very strange, also weird students in a slightly light, fluffy, but also deadly setting, then go to explosionhigh.com and check it out. It's still got a little bit of time left, depending on when Mike posts this up, and hopefully it'll be something that you'll find very fun. That's it from me. Bye.